Snow fell hard over Aspen, Colorado. The kind of thick, relentless snowfall that erased tire tracks within minutes and turned the world into something silent and unforgiving. It coated the long stone driveway of the Carter estate in white, dulling the shine of wealth beneath it. Jack Miller stood at the iron gates, his twins pressed close to his sides. Evan clutched his backpack with both hands, jaw tight, trying to look older than his 8 years. Lucy buried her face into Jack's coat, small fingers gripping the fabric as if letting go might make everything fall apart. Behind them, the estate lights glowed warm and golden, unchanged, untouched by grief. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since Emily's funeral. 3 weeks since Jack stood in a church filled with polished wood and polite condolences, listening to people tell him how strong he was, while his world collapsed quietly inside his chest. 3 weeks since he buried the woman he loved. And now, apparently, his place in her family. Richard Carter stood just inside the gates, his tailored wool coat spotless despite the storm, posture straight, hands folded calmly behind his back, as if this were a business meeting, not an eviction. Beside him, Elaine Carter avoided looking at the children, her gaze fixed somewhere over Jack's shoulder, where the snow blurred into nothing. Movers worked behind them, tossing boxes onto the driveway with careless efficiency. A framed photo shattered when it hit the ice. Glass scattered like ice crystals, reflecting the estate lights in sharp, broken angles. Jack didn't move. He had faced gunfire overseas, dragged wounded men from burning vehicles. But this humiliation cut deeper than anything he carried back from war. At his feet, Shadow stood rigid. The German shepherd's body was low and tense, muscles coiled, ears forward, amber eyes locked on the strangers who dared push the children aside. A low growl vibrated in his chest, not loud, not wild, deliberate, protective. Time 200 ms. Easy, boy, Jack murmured under his breath, 2 fingers resting against Shadow's collar. Shadow didn't look away. Richard finally spoke, his voice clear, emotionless, cutting through the storm like a blade. This arrangement is no longer appropriate, Jack. Jack lifted his eyes slowly. Appropriate. His voice was hoarse, scraped raw by weeks of sleepless nights. Emily's body isn't even cold yet. Elaine flinched. Richard did not. You're not in a position to provide stability. No permanent income. No permanent residence. And given your history, we believe the children would be better off elsewhere. Evan stiffened. Lucy's grip tightened. Jack felt the words land like punches, one after another, measured, precise. You promised Emily you'd look after her family. That includes us. Richard's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. Annoyance, not regret. I am looking after my grandchildren. Then colder. You are no longer part of that equation. The gate's motor hummed. Metal locks disengaged. A heavy final clank. The sound echoed inside Jack's chest. Elaine finally spoke. "This doesn't have to be ugly." Jack almost laughed. The sound never made it out. Shadow stepped forward. Just one step. But it was enough. The dog placed himself squarely in front of the twins, broad back blocking them from view, teeth flashing, growl deepening. The movers froze. One stepped back instinctively. "Control your animal!" Jack tightened his grip on the leash. He's doing exactly what he was trained to do. Richard stepped closer, snow crunching beneath polished shoes. "You don't belong here anymore, Jack." For a moment the world narrowed. Lucy's muffled sobs, the steady breathing of the dog at Jack's feet. Then Jack nodded once. He bent down slowly, not from weakness, but from the effort of holding himself together. He helped Lucy into her coat, adjusted Evan's collar, gathered what little remained scattered across the snow. As he turned toward the old pickup truck waiting at the edge of the drive, Shadow glanced back one last time at the glowing estate. Then he followed Jack into the storm. Behind them, the iron gates closed. The iron gates closed behind them, with a sound Jack Miller would carry for the rest of his life. He didn't look back as he guided the twins into the old pickup truck. Snow crusted the windshield almost immediately. The wipers struggled, barely keeping up, as Aspen disappeared behind a white curtain. Lucy curled into herself on the seat, silent now. Her earlier sobs replaced by a hollow stillness that frightened Jack more than tears ever could. Evan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, absorbing something far heavier than cold. Shadow jumped into the back seat and settled between them, his body pressed tight against their legs, a living barrier against the world outside. Jack caught the dog's reflection in the rearview mirror, steady, alert, unbroken. The drive down the mountain felt endless. Jack's phone buzzed once in the cup holder, then again. He ignored it until the third vibration rattled the console. When he finally glanced down, he already knew who it was. The security firm. He pulled over near a frozen overlook. Pine trees bowed under the weight of snow. The engine idled, rough and uneven, as Jack answered. "Jack Miller." The man's voice was polite, distant. "This is Tom Reynolds. We've reviewed the latest evaluation." Jack closed his eyes. "Your service record is outstanding. But given recent events, the board feels it's best to suspend your contract. Temporarily. Because my wife died." Jack's voice was flat. A pause. "Because you've been under considerable stress." Jack looked at Evan and Lucy through the mirror. Two small silhouettes, wrapped in winter coats, their world shrinking by the hour. "I've survived worse." "Haven't I?" Reynolds cleared his throat. "We'll be in touch." The line went dead. Jack set the phone down, rested his forehead against the steering wheel. His breath fogged the glass. For a moment, just one. His hands trembled. Shadow made a low sound from the back seat. Not a bark, not a whine. Something softer, grounding. Jack straightened. He didn't have the luxury of falling apart. They stopped at a gas station on the edge of town, flickering fluorescent lights, burnt coffee. The smell never left. Jack counted bills at the counter, his fingers stiff from cold. The clerk avoided eye contact. Outside, Evan watched the snow fall, like he was memorizing it. "Dad, are we going somewhere else?" Jack swallowed. "Yeah, buddy. Somewhere quiet." Lucy didn't ask anything. She reached out and took Shadow's paw, holding it like an anchor. By nightfall, they were on the highway, Aspen far behind them. The road stretched empty and dark, headlights cutting through blowing snow. Jack drove on muscle memory, mile after mile, following a route he hadn't planned, only remembered. Montana. Emily had mentioned it once, years ago, in passing. Just a cabin by a lake. Nobody goes there anymore. It was the only place Jack could think of where no one would look for them. By the time they reached the turnoff, exhaustion pressed down on him like lead. The road narrowed, packed dirt, ice, trees closed in tight on both sides. When the cabin appeared, it looked smaller than Jack remembered. Dark, silent, forgotten. Cracked windows, a sagging porch, snow drifting through gaps in the boards. "Dad, we're staying here?" Jack killed the engine. The sudden quiet rang in his ears. "For now. We'll make it work." He hoped his voice sounded steadier than he felt. Inside, the air smelled of cold wood and damp earth. No electricity, no heat. Just shadows, and wind groaning over the lake. Jack spread sleeping bags near the fireplace, hands moving automatically. Shadow didn't lie down. He paced, sniffed the floor, stopped at the center of the room, ears pricked, nose pressed to the boards, listening to something Jack couldn't hear. "Shadow. Easy." The dog looked back, not defiant, concerned. Jack rubbed his eyes, too tired to question it, too tired to think. In the dark, Evan whispered, "Dad, we're still a family, right?" Jack looked at his children, at the dog standing watch, at the cold cabin closing in around them. "Yes, we are." Outside, the wind howled across the frozen lake, and beneath the cabin floor, something waited. Morning came without warmth. A thin gray light seeped through the cracked windows, settling over the cabin like dust. Jack Miller woke with his back stiff against the wooden floor. The dull ache of another sleepless night pressed behind his eyes. For a few seconds, he didn't move. He listened. The wind skimming across the frozen lake. The faint creak of old boards adjusting to the cold. The slow, even breathing of his children. Evan lay on his side, arms tucked tight to his chest. Lucy had curled into shadow, her small hand buried in the thick fur along his neck. The dog hadn't shifted all night. He lay awake, head lifted, eyes tracking the room, as if the darkness itself might move. Jack pushed himself up and rubbed his hands together for warmth. His breath hung in the air. No power, no heat. Just the quiet reminder that this place had been abandoned for a reason. He found an old kettle under the sink, filled it with water from a jug he'd brought from the truck. The small camp stove sputtered to life. Weak, but enough. The smell of instant coffee spread slowly through the cabin. Thin, bitter, familiar. It felt like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The twins stirred as the light grew stronger. "Dad?" Lucy whispered, sitting up. Her eyes moved around the room, as if hoping it had changed overnight. Jack crouched in front of her. "Hey." "Morning." She glanced toward the broken window. Snow piled along the sill. "It's really cold." "I know," he said gently. "We'll fix that." Evan pulled his jacket tighter. "How long are we staying?" Jack didn't answer right away. He looked around the cabin. Peeling walls, a sagging beam, a fireplace choked with ash and debris. This place wasn't shelter. It was a pause, a place to catch breath. Just long enough. Shadow rose and moved toward the center of the room. He lowered his nose to the floorboards, sniffing, short, deliberate. Then he stopped. One spot, near the fireplace. He pawed once. Light. Testing. Jack noticed it this time. Shadow. Sharper than he intended. "Leave it." The dog didn't obey. He pressed his nose harder against the wood. A low whine in his throat. Not fear, not excitement. Urgency. Evan watched him closely. He's been doing that since last night. Jack exhaled slowly. His nerves were already stretched thin. He didn't have room for mystery. Not now. Probably mice. Or the cold settling the boards. Shadow glanced back at him. Ears angled, eyes steady. He stepped away. Only half a step. He stayed close, watching. After breakfast, Jack took stock. One working lantern, 2 blankets, a toolbox missing half its contents. Outside, the lake lay frozen solid, a wide sheet of dull silver stretching toward the trees. The world felt very far away. He sent Evan and Lucy to the porch with Shadow, then checked the truck. The engine coughed, then stalled. Jack leaned his forehead against the hood. Cold metal. For a moment, the weight of it, all pressed down hard. Emily's face, the gates in Aspen, Richard's voice, telling him he didn't belong. He forced the thoughts away. "You okay, Dad?" Jack straightened. "Yeah. Just needs time." The lie tasted familiar. They spent the afternoon patching what they could. Lucy lined pine cones along the porch. Evan helped Shadow carry sticks. Proud, careful. As the sun dipped lower, the light shifted. Shadows stretched long. The silence deepened. That was when Shadow froze. Near the fireplace again. Body tense. Ears forward. A low growl rolled through his chest. Slow. Controlled. Jack felt it then. Not fear. Something colder. familiar. A sound from beneath the floor. Not wood, not wind. A dull metallic knock. Faint. Unmistakable. Dad. Did you hear that? Jack nodded once. Probably the house shifting. The words rang hollow. Shadow pawed again, harder. Jack steadied him by the collar. Not now. We'll look later. Shadow stayed still. Didn't growl. Didn't lie down. As night fell, the cabin settled into uneasy stillness. Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thoughts circling places he didn't want to go. Shadow stayed on watch, and beneath the floor, something waited. Jack didn't sleep. He lay still on the cabin floor, eyes open, staring into the dark. Outside, the wind dragged its fingers across the frozen lake. The sound wasn't loud, but it was constant, like breathing that didn't belong to anyone in the room. Every few minutes, the old boards creaked, not from movement, from weight, settling into age. Shadow remained upright near the fireplace, ears angled forward, body rigid, not pacing, not restless, watching. Jack had learned to trust that posture. Just before dawn, Shadow's head lifted slightly. His nose twitched. Once, then again. He turned toward the front window, the one Jack had boarded up the afternoon before. A low growl rolled from his chest. Not loud. A warning. Jack sat up slowly. "What is it, boy?" Shadow didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the tree line beyond the lake. Jack eased toward the window. Careful. Quiet. He lifted the loose board just enough to look. At first, only fog. Snow. Then, between two dark pines, something caught the light. Metal. A vehicle. Black. Boxy. Parked far enough back to be missed if you weren't looking for it. Jack's chest tightened. The SUV sat silent. Engine off, no movement. Just presence. Jack stepped back. Pulse steady. Sharp. This wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Someone had followed them. Someone had found this place. A floorboard creaked. Evan stood in the doorway. "Dad?" Jack turned, level moderate. "Hey. What's wrong?" "I couldn't sleep." Evan's eyes flicked to Shadow, then the window. "Is something out there?" Jack knelt. "Probably just a truck. This area's quiet. Not empty." Evan nodded, but he didn't believe it. By mid-morning, the SUV was gone. No tracks. No sign it had ever been there. That bothered Jack more than tracks ever could. Near the tree line, he found footprints. Adult, heavy boots. They stopped, 10 yards from the cabin, then turned back. Jack crouched. The edges were sharp, recent. His phone buzzed. "Richard Carter. You've put yourself in a dangerous position. Living out there. No heat. No support. You didn't call for the kids. I called to tell you what's coming. Say it. You're unstable, unemployed, isolated, advised by professionals. You hired someone. I did what I had to do. Emily trusted me. A pause. She shouldn't have. The line went dead. Jack stood there. The pressure crept in. Quiet. Familiar. Then shadow pressed against him. Solid. Warm. Real. Jack breathed. The panic receded. Dad, are we in trouble? Jack straightened. No. We're just being tested. As dusk fell, the wind rose. Snow moved sideways. The cabin groaned. The lights flickered, then went out. Shadow moved instantly, between the children and the door. Then Sean. From beneath the floor, near the fireplace, metal, dull, hollow, knocking. Shadow growled. Jack didn't move. Not yet. The lantern flickered once, then steadied. Jack stood frozen in the middle of the cabin, every muscle tuned to the sound that had no business being there. The metallic knock came again. Soft, hollow, unmistakably wrong. Not wood contracting, not ice shifting. Something solid. Something buried. Shadow's growl deepened. It vibrated through the floorboards, like a warning sent through bone instead of sound. Lucy clutched Evan's arm. Dad. What is that? Jack forced himself to breathe. Slow, controlled. The way he'd been trained when panic tried to claw its way up his spine. Probably old pipes. He said it evenly. This place hasn't been used in a long time. Even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't true. The power was already gone. No hum, no warmth. Just the lantern's thin glow, carving weak shapes into the dark. Outside, the wind howled harder. Snow slammed the walls like handfuls of gravel. The storm had found them. Jack guided the twins closer to the fireplace. His body shifted instinctively, between them and the rest of the room. Shadow stayed low, eyes fixed on the floor near the hearth, ears twitching at every sound. The knock came again. This time Evan heard it clearly. That's not the house. His voice barely a whisper. Jack nodded once. I know. He moved toward the fireplace. Slowly. Measured. The floorboard Shadow had watched sat just left of the hearth. Warped. Darker than the rest. Nails slightly raised. Jack crouched and rested his hand on it. Cold. Another sound came from beneath, followed by a faint vibration that traveled up Jack's arm. Lucy sobbed softly. Please don't open it. Jack swallowed. His instincts screamed to act. Clear the unknown. Confront the threat. Another part of him said this wasn't the moment. Not tonight. Something struck the side of the cabin. Hard. Once, then again, Shadow spun. A sharp bark toward the front door. Hackles raised. Jack snapped upright, heart hammering. He reached above the doorframe and pulled down the shotgun. He didn't load it. He didn't point it. He held it because the weight grounded him. "Stay here." He whispered it to the children. The knock came again, this time from the door. 3 raps, firm, controlled, not desperate. Jack stepped forward, every sense on high alert. "Who is it?" No answer, only the storm. He peered through the narrow gap in the boarded window. Snow blew sideways. No silhouette, no movement, just wind tearing at the trees. Then the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Shadow didn't relax. He returned to the fireplace, pawed once at the floorboard, whined low. Jack watched him, torn between what waited above and what lay below. "Dad, I don't like this." Jack knelt and cupped Lucy's face. "I know, but we're okay. Level, moderate. We're together." He wasn't lying. Not entirely. The storm intensified. Snow piled high against the walls. The temperature dropped fast. Jack coaxed the fire back to life. Breath fogged the air. The kids drifted into uneasy sleep, wrapped in blankets. Shadow curled protectively between them. Jack didn't sleep. He sat against the wall, the shotgun across his knees. His eyes moved. Door, window, floorboard. Every creak felt deliberate. Every gust of wind felt personal. The metallic sound didn't return, but Jack knew better than to believe that meant safety. After midnight, his phone buzzed weakly. One last pulse of signal, a single text. "You can't protect them forever." No name, no number. Jack closed his fist around the phone. Shadow lifted his head. Their eyes met in the lantern light. No fear, only resolve. Jack exhaled slowly, forcing the tightness out of his chest. "Tomorrow." He whispered it to the dog. "We deal with it tomorrow." The storm roared outside, swallowing the cabin in white and sound. And beneath the floor, something waited. Patiently. Closer than Jack wanted to believe. Morning didn't bring relief. It arrived cold and colorless. A pale light filtered through snow-crusted boards, as if the world itself was holding back. Jack Miller rose quietly, joints stiff, eyes burning. A night without sleep still clung to him. The storm had eased, but it left behind a heavy stillness, too calm to be trusted. Shadow was already awake. He stood near the fireplace, unmoving, focused. His nose hovered inches above the same warped plank. Tail low, body angled, ready, not afraid, focused. Jack felt it again. The certainty that the night had only paused, not passed. He glanced back at the twins. Evan slept fitfully, brow furrowed. Lucy had curled into Shadow's blanket. Her fingers still clutched a corner of the dog's fur, even in sleep. Jack's chest tightened. Whatever was coming, it would come through him first. Okay, he whispered it to himself. We're doing this. He fetched the crowbar from the toolbox, knelt beside the hearth. The metal felt colder than the air. Shadow stepped closer, positioning himself just off Jack's left knee, eyes never leaving the board. Jack wedged the crowbar beneath the edge, applied pressure. The board resisted, then cracked. "Dad!" Lucy gasped awake. "I'm okay." Jack said it quickly. "Stay back." He pried again. The board bent, then collapsed inward. A hollow drop that sucked the air from the room. Dust and cold rushed up from below. Shadow lunged, then snapped back. His teeth caught Jack's sleeve, yanked him away from the edge. The floor gave way completely. Wood shattered. Nails screamed. A section of floor fell through, revealing a dark cavity beneath. The lantern slipped, clattered against stone, then settled in the pit, its glow cutting through the dust. Lucy screamed. Evan dragged her back. Jack steadied himself, heart pounding. "It's okay. Nobody move." Shadow stood at the edge of the hole, muscles coiled, hackles raised, not at the darkness, but at what lay within it. Metal, a black steel case, wedged between beams, scarred, reinforced. Jack knew the design, military grade. His breath caught. He lowered himself carefully, boots scraping stone. He grabbed the case, heavier than it looked. Solid, deliberate. He hauled it up, set it on the intact floor. A dull, final thud. Silence filled the cabin. On the lid, a name, etched faintly, unmistakable. Emily Carter Miller. Jack stared, as if it might vanish if he blinked. "Dad, that's Mom's name." Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." Shadow sat beside the case, his posture eased, from warning to witness. Jack released the latches. They opened too easily. Inside, Emily's shawl, an envelope, a flash drive, legal documents, and a letter. Jack lifted it reverently, tracing his name. He didn't open it yet. "Dad, why would Mom hide this?" Jack closed his eyes briefly. Because she knew. Because she planned. Because she loved them. "I don't know. But we're going to find out." He unfolded the letter. "If you're reading this, Jack, then my father has already begun." The words struck like a blow. Lucy covered her mouth. Evan leaned into Jack. Shadow pressed closer, anchoring them all. The letter continued. Warnings, instructions, names, a trust, a condition. Then one line. "Trust Shadow. He knows." Jack lowered the letter, hands trembling. She knew. She knew this would happen. The cabin felt smaller. The threat had changed shape. Jack sealed the case. His resolve hardened. Not anger, clarity. We're not staying here tonight. Where are we going? Somewhere safer. Somewhere with answers. Shadow rose, moved toward the door, leading, without looking back. Jack followed. Jack didn't read the letter out loud. Not at first. He sat on the edge of the broken floor, the steel case between his boots, Emily's handwriting trembling slightly in his grip. The words blurred, not because he couldn't see them, but because every sentence felt like it had been written from the future. Calm, deliberate, painfully certain. Shadow sat beside him, shoulder pressed against Jack's knee. Breathing slow, steady. The twins hovered nearby, silent, sensing the weight of the moment, even if they didn't yet understand it. Jack finally began to read. If you're reading this, then my father has already crossed the line I feared he would. Jack swallowed. I didn't want to burden you with this while I was alive. You were carrying enough. But I knew that once I was gone, Richard would try to decide our children's lives for us. Lucy's fingers tightened in Jack's sleeve. Grandpa? Jack nodded once. His eyes never left the page. Emily's letter didn't accuse. It explained. Control, disguised as concern. Money, used like gravity, pulling everything toward it, whether people wanted to move or not. The Carter name, the image, the quiet expectation that obedience mattered more than happiness. I refused to let that become Evan and Lucy's future. Jack felt a sharp ache behind his ribs. He remembered the arguments, short, unfinished. Conversations Emily ended with a tired smile and a change of subject. He thought it was illness, draining her strength. It had been fear, level moderate. There is a trust my father never knew about. It comes from my mother's side. It is not Carter money. It is protected. It is meant only for the children, and for you if you ever need it to keep them safe. Jack lowered the letter, his breath unsteady. She hid all this, right under our feet. Why didn't she tell you? Jack didn't answer immediately. Because she knew him. Because she knew he would have tried to fix it, confront it, carry it himself. Because she wanted him focused on loving them, not fighting ghosts. He kept reading. The trust activates under one condition. If my father attempts to take the children away from you, Jack's jaw tightened. If it happens, you must act quickly. Contact Michael Grant. And Jack. Trust Shadow. I trained him to respond to stress before I ever told you why. Jack's chest constricted. Shadow shifted slightly, as if acknowledging his name. Emily's final lines were softer. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. I'm sorry you're reading this instead of hearing it from me. Please don't let guilt convince you this is your fault. You gave me peace. Now give it to our children. Jack folded the letter carefully. His hands shook. despite his effort to stay composed. No one spoke. The wind rattled the cabin, but it sounded distant now, muted by the truth settling in the room. So, Mom knew Grandpa would try to take us? She was afraid he might. Is that why he made us leave? Yes. Shadow stood suddenly, moved to the window, posture alert. Jack felt it again. The danger was no longer theoretical. It had shape, direction, intention. Jack sealed the case. We're leaving. Now. Where? To someone your mom trusted. A lawyer. Someone who can protect us. Jack's phone buzzed weakly. One last fragment of signal. A voicemail notification. Unknown number. Jack didn't listen. He didn't need to. Shadow was already at the door. Waiting. Ready. Jack lifted the steel case. Looked at his children. Your mom didn't just leave us memories. She left us a plan. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the storm was no longer in the sky. It had moved into their lives. The law office smelled like old paper and cedar. Jack Miller sat rigid in the chair across from Michael Grant's desk. The steel case rested at his feet, like a coiled truth waiting to strike. Outside the tall window, snow slid off the ledge in quiet sheets. The town moved on with its morning, as if nothing extraordinary was about to be said. Michael Grant was not a dramatic man. Late 60s, wire-rimmed glasses, hands that moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who understood the weight of words before releasing them. I was hoping you'd come. Jack's jaw tightened. She told you? Grant nodded once. Emily planned for this. Lucy leaned into Jack's side. Evan sat straight, shoulders stiff, trying to look older than 8. Shadow lay at their feet, head up, eyes tracking every movement. Jack slid the steel case forward. She hid it under the cabin. Grant opened it carefully. His expression changed the moment he saw the documents. Recognition. Confirmation. Something like respect. She followed every instruction. Jack didn't lean back. Start talking. Grant removed a folder, placed it on the desk. Emily was the sole heir to her maternal grandmother's estate. Not Carter money. Private assets. Protected holdings. Real estate. Long-term investments. Jack's mind struggled to keep pace. How much? Grant met his eyes. $200 million. The room went silent. Lucy's breath caught. Evan stared. Even Shadow shifted slightly, sensing the change in the room. Jack shook his head, slow, disbelieving. That's not possible. We lived paycheck to paycheck. That was by design. Grant's voice stayed gentle. Emily refused to live like the money owned her. She didn't want your marriage or your children, shaped by leverage. Jack pressed his hands against his thighs, grounding himself. So why now? Grant slid one page forward, an activation clause. Emily structured the trust to remain dormant, unless one event occurred. An attempt by her father to interfere with custody. Jack stared at the page until the words blurred. She predicted this. She prepared for it. Jack exhaled sharply. He threw us out. He hired investigators. He called me unstable. Grant nodded, which triggered the trust automatically. Mom knew Grandpa would do this? Grant's expression softened. She knew control mattered more to him than trust. Jack leaned back slowly. The room spun just slightly. $200 million. A number too large to feel real. And yet, here it was. Time 2000 PM. What happens now? Grant folded his hands. You have full authority. Legal protection. Custody defense. And if necessary, personal security. Jack almost laughed. Short, bitter. I don't want security teams. You may not get a choice. Richard Carter has already filed for emergency custody. Jack's muscles locked. Already? This morning. Lucy clutched Jack's arm. He's not taking you. Grant waited. What are the odds? Without the trust? Not good. And with it? Grant met his gaze. He loses. Jack sat quietly. Not relief, not triumph. Clarity. She didn't leave me money. She left me a shield. Grant answered softly. She trusted your character more than your reaction. Jack closed his eyes. Outside, a vehicle passed. Shadow's ears twitched. Richard will escalate. He always does. Jack stood, lifted the steel case. Then we're done waiting. Grant nodded. I'll file the injunction today. At the door, Jack paused. Time Shu went to thank you. Grant smiled faintly. Thank Emily. Outside, the cold air cut sharp. Jack breathed deeply. $200 million. And none of it mattered compared to the grip on his children's hands. This wasn't about wealth. It was about war. The papers arrived before dawn. Jack Miller heard the knock from the far end of the motel hallway. Flat. Official. The sound carried through thin walls. Shadow was on his feet instantly. Body angled toward the door. A low warning rumble rose from his chest. Jack didn't reach for the handle right away. He checked the peephole, then opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. A uniformed deputy stood there, breath fogging in the cold air. A folder tucked under one arm. His eyes flicked past Jack, toward the room behind him. Mr. Miller, I need you to accept these documents. Jack took the folder without a word. Inside the room, Lucy sat up on the bed, eyes wide. Evan didn't move. He just watched, silent, absorbing the moment. The door closed. The lock clicked. Jack set the folder on the small table, opened it slowly. Emergency custody petition. Psychological evaluation request. Temporary protective language. Dressed up as concern. Richard Carter's signature sat at the bottom. Bold. Unashamed. He really did it. Lucy's voice trembled. What does it mean? Jack knelt in front of her. It means your grandfather is trying to scare us. That's all? Jack held Evan's gaze. That's all. But inside his chest tightened. By noon, the calls started. A child welfare voicemail, a psychologist's email, a single text. This doesn't have to be ugly. Jack didn't reply. Shadow stayed close, closer than usual, steady, grounding. When Jack's hands shook, Shadow pressed against his leg, pulling him back, into the room, into the moment. You're doing good. Just like she said. That afternoon, Michael Grant called. He's pushing for speed. He wants this decided fast. Jack leaned against the window, watching cars pass. Can he do that? He can try. He's leveraging influence. He's painting a picture. Of what? An unstable veteran. A grieving father. A dangerous dog. Shadow lifted his head, thumped his tail once. Tell me what to do. Don't isolate. And don't take the bait. The knock came again before dinner. This time, not paperwork. 2 officers stood outside, calm, professional, a social worker behind them, clipboard in hand. We just want to check on the kids. Shadow stepped forward, between Jack and the doorway, not aggressive, protective. They're fine. You need a warrant, a glance, a nod. Not today. But we will be back. The door closed. Time, 700 moms. Lucy broke. They're going to take us. Jack dropped to his knees, wrapped them tight, breathing slow, steady. No, they're not. Shadow pressed in, a wall of fur, warmth. The tremor came. The room faded. Sand, heat, metal doors. Stay. Shadow leaned in, anchored him. The shaking eased. That night, a message from Grant. Tomorrow morning. Temporary removal hearing. Be ready. Jack sat awake. Emily's letter. The plan. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly, headlights off. Shadow growled. Jack didn't look away. The strike had come. The knock came at 8:07 a.m. Not loud, not angry, precise. Jack Miller was already awake, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, boots laced, shoulders squared. He hadn't slept. Shadow stood beside him, alert, ready. He felt the shift in the air long before the sound reached the door. Lucy looked up from the second bed, eyes wide. Evan froze, hands clenched into the blanket. Jack opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway. Behind them, the same social worker, a thin stack of papers. No one smiled. Mr. Miller, we have a court order. Jack nodded once. He already knew. The social worker stepped forward. This is a temporary protective placement. The children will remain with their grandparents until the hearing concludes. Lucy screamed. No! She ran to Jack, buried her face in his jacket. Evan followed, gripping Jack's arm, shaking. Shadow moved instantly, positioned himself in front of the doorway, body low, muscles tight, a deep growl, controlled, defensive. "Sir, we don't want this to escalate." Jack raised a hand slowly, rested it on Shadow's collar. "Stay." Shadow didn't lunge, didn't bare his teeth. He held his ground. "We're not here to hurt anyone." Lucy looked up, tears streaking her face. "Don't take my dad away." Jack's chest cracked open. He pressed his forehead to hers. "They're not taking me. They're just moving you for a little while." Evan shook his head. "You're lying." Jack couldn't argue. He knelt, forced himself to breathe. "Listen to me. This isn't the end. This is a pause. And pauses end." Lucy sobbed harder. "What if they don't?" Jack looked at Shadow, then back at his children. "They will. Because your mom made sure of it." "Mr. Miller." Jack stood. He didn't shout, didn't plead, didn't break. He knelt again, hugged them tight, memorizing everything. "Be brave. Stay together. This doesn't change who we are. I'll watch Lucy. I know you will." Lucy wrapped her arms around Shadow's neck. "Promise you'll find us." Shadow licked her cheek once, rested his head against her shoulder. They were guided away. Evan looked back. Lucy reached for Jack. Until the last second. Shadow tried to follow. "Shadow." The dog froze, torn. "Stay." Shadow sat. The door closed. The hallway swallowed Lucy's cries. Jack stood alone, then slid down. The pressure surged. Shadow pressed his full weight against Jack's chest, breathing slow, deliberate. "Stay with me." The panic receded. Jack dialed. They took them. "The hearing is in 40 minutes. Jack closed his eyes. "Then let's end this." Shadow stood. Jack rose with him. This wasn't the moment he prepared for. It was worse. And it was exactly the moment Emily knew would come. Should Jack fight this quietly in court, confront the grandfather directly, or trust Emily's plan and let the truth explode? Comment 1, 2, or 3 below. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old wood. Jack Miller stood at the defense table, Shadow at his heel, the leash loose in his hand. He hadn't changed clothes. He didn't need to. What he needed was the truth to arrive, before the lies hardened into a verdict. Across the aisle, Richard Carter sat upright. Tailored suit, practiced posture, a calm face, the kind money teaches men to wear. His attorney leaned close, whispering confidence. This was familiar ground. Influence. Control. Michael Grant leaned in. "When I say now, you open the case. Nothing before." Jack nodded once. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The proceedings moved fast. Too fast. Allegations read aloud. Clinical. Detached. Instability. Unsafe environment. Risk factors. A psychologist summarized an assessment Jack hadn't been allowed to challenge. Richard's attorney stood. This is a matter of child safety. Temporary placement ensures stability. Jack kept his eyes forward. When the attorney finished, the judge turned. Counsel. Grant stood. Calm. Precise. Your Honor, we move to dismiss this petition entirely. A scoff. Grant continued. And we submit a federal injunction superseding this order. A murmur rippled. The judge frowned. On what grounds? Grant didn't raise his voice. Unlawful custodial interference. Suppression of estate, notifications, and activation of a protected trust. He turned slightly. Now. Jack stepped forward, opened the steel case. Documents slid onto the table. Orderly, deliberate. Trust papers. Activation clause. Timestamps. Affidavit. Grant addressed the court. The trust was established by the children's mother. It remained dormant until custody was threatened. Objection. Overruled. Grant placed the final item, a recording. Emily's voice filled the room. If something happens to me, my father will try to take control. Do not let him. Protect Jack. Protect the children. Silence fell. Richard's face drained. Grant continued. The trust provides legal defense, custody protection, and penalties for interference. The judge leaned back. And this trust is valued at $200 million. The room shifted. Richard stood abruptly. This is manipulation. Sit down. Shadow lifted his head, then settled again. Grant concluded, this is not about wealth. It is about intent. The judge removed her glasses. The emergency petition is suspended. Children are to be returned to their father immediately. Jack's breath caught. Time fuses. Richard slumped. Jack closed his eyes. Outside, Grant's phone buzzed. They're on their way. The doors burst open. Evan, Lucy. Jack dropped to his knees. Shadow circled once, then sat guard. I told you. Pauses end. You came. Jack looked past them, met Richard's stare. No anger, no victory, only truth. Yes, I did. The checks were ready within a week. Michael Grant laid them out on a polished conference table. Numbers printed so clean they almost felt unreal. Jack Miller didn't touch them. He stood at the window instead, watching late afternoon traffic crawl past. Life returning in fits and starts. Most people buy property first. A house, security. Jack nodded. We'll get there. But not like that. They didn't move into a gated community. They rented something modest, near the edge of town, close to a school, close to a park, close to the kind of quiet that didn't come with guards. Evan chose the smaller bedroom because it faced the trees. Lucy claimed the one with the slanted ceiling. Shadow found the sunny patch by the back door and made it his. Jack kept the curtains open. The trust paid for things he'd avoided for years: a lawyer, insurance, mental health care without wait lists, without stigma. Jack attended counseling without a uniform, without explanations. He spoke when he could. He sat in silence when he couldn't. No one rushed him. On a gray Tuesday morning, Jack signed the papers that mattered most. The Emily Miller Foundation. Its mission fit on one page: support for veterans, mental health access, service dog training. When words failed, the grant officer asked about the Carter name. Jack shook his head. Emily chose her own legacy. They converted a warehouse: concrete floors, wide doors, sunlight. Shadow walked it first, nose down, tail steady, approving it in his quiet way. Jack watched handlers work with dogs who carried scars: fear, hypervigilance, startled breaths. And he recognized himself. This was where the money belonged, not in silence, in service. The press called. Jack declined. Attention didn't heal. Consistency did. He showed up. School pickups, burnt dinners, thunderstorms on the floor. He listened. Really listened. Shadow aged into his role. Not a mascot. Not a miracle. A presence. When panic crept in, Shadow pressed close. When nights stretched long, Shadow stayed awake. When laughter returned, Shadow watched, content. Richard Carter stayed away. Supervised visits, strict terms. Jack didn't explain absences. He taught something simpler. People choose, and choices tell the truth. One evening, Lucy sat beside him. Is Mom proud? Jack watched Evan throw a ball for Shadow, laughter breaking through the quiet. Yes, I think she is. The first cohort graduated. Veterans beside dogs, reading breath, posture. Jack didn't speak. He stayed. Money hadn't rescued them. Truth had. Boundaries had. Showing up had. As winter returned, softer this time, Jack hung a wooden sign. No ceremony. One nail. One strike. The words were plain. Home is who stays. Shadow lay beneath it, breathing easy. And for the first time since the gates in Aspen closed, Jack believed it. Time 6,000. Spring didn't erase what winter had left behind. The snow melted slowly along the edges of the yard. Grass reappeared, flattened, marked by months of cold. Jack Miller watched it from the kitchen window. Coffee poured. Steam rose. The house stayed quiet. Mornings were calmer now, predictable. And still, sometimes his body woke first, bracing, listening for a danger that no longer lived there. He had learned not to fight it. Recovery wasn't pretending the past had loosened its grip. It was noticing when it tightened, and choosing to stay anyway. Lucy still slept with the hallway light on. Some nights, she woke crying, dreams without words. Jack would sit beside her, speaking softly, until her breathing slowed. Shadow was always there, head resting against the mattress, like a promise. No questions, no pressure, no need to be brave. Evan stopped asking about Aspen. Instead, he asked about ordinary things: baseball scores, school projects, engines. Jack understood. Evan was rebuilding his world from the ground up, choosing facts that stayed put. Family counseling became routine. Tuesdays, 4 o'clock. No uniforms, no labels, just conversations, moving at their pace. Jack spoke honestly about panic, about shaking hands. The counselor listened. She didn't rush. You survived. Now you're learning how to live. That felt right. Shadow moved more slowly now. His muzzle grayed, just enough to notice in the light. He slept deeper. Time 200 mams. But when Jack's breath shortened, Shadow was there. Steady, practiced, familiar. Service dogs weren't cures. They were companions, trained to notice what humans ignored. Jack noticed everything now. Lucy flinching, Evan scanning rooms, his own shoulders tightening. Scars didn't disappear. They changed shape. One rainy afternoon, Lucy held up a drawing. This is our house. A door, a tree, 3 stick figures, and a dog, bigger than the rest. You made Shadow huge. He makes us feel small, bad things. Jack swallowed. That night, Evan asked quietly, "Are you still scared sometimes?" Jack didn't hide. "Yes, me too." They lay there, the dog breathing between them, the house holding steady. Richard Carter sent a letter. Not legal, not demanding. Jack read it once, then placed it in a drawer. Healing didn't require opening every door. The foundation continued. Quiet work, lives shifting in small ways. Jack didn't call it success. He called it continuity. On the first warm evening, Jack sat on the porch. Fireflies danced. Shadow lay at his feet. The wooden sign creaked softly. Home is who stays. Jack knew the scars would remain. Healing wasn't a finish line. But this, they weren't running. They were standing. Together. The first morning of fall arrived without ceremony. Jack Miller woke before the sun. Not from fear, from habit. The house was quiet, not empty, earned. He stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, breath fogging the cool air. He watched the fog lift from the lake. Thin ribbons, patient. Shadow followed, slower now, settling beside him with a soft huff. The wooden sign hung steady by the door. Home is who stays. Jack ran his thumb along the grain, feeling the grooves he carved himself. He thought of closed doors, the iron gate in Aspen, the courthouse steps, the nights when survival was the only plan left. Estate meetings once felt like threats. Now they felt like safeguards. Trust wasn't money. It was time. Time to heal, to choose, to remain. Lucy padded down the hallway, socks on wood, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Evan followed, hair wild, baseball glove in hand. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in the quiet. "Can we go to the hill?" Jack nodded. They walked the familiar path, past the training field, veterans and dogs moving in steady rhythm, past the cabins, lights glowing softly, even in daylight. The foundation had grown, not loud, present. People came here to breathe. Jack didn't lead them. He stayed. At the crest of the hill, the valley opened wide. Frostline Ridge stood calm in the distance. Jack felt the weight in his chest. Not heavy, not sharp. Just there. Love leaves marks, worth carrying. Shadow paused. Time 200 mums. Nose lifted. He moved to the birch tree, sniffed once, pawed gently, as if checking a memory. All clear. Lucy took his hand. Evan leaned into his shoulder. The wind shifted, pine and clean air. Jack thought of Emily, of planning quietly, of trusting a dog to find truth, of turning wealth into protection, protection into choice. Are we okay now? Jack waited. Truth needed time. We're okay. Not because nothing bad can happen, but because we know who we are when it does. They headed back down. Shadow moved ahead, then waited. He always did. Later, a veteran finished a session, hands shaking, then steady. Jack recognized the moment. When a body learns it's safe to stand down, the work would continue. The trust would protect the living. At sunset, Jack returned to the porch. Laughter drifted through open windows. Shadow lay at his feet, breathing slow. Jack looked at the sign. Some doors close to keep you out. Others close to teach you where the real entrance is. He rested his hand on Shadow's head. You found it. The tail thumped once. As night settled, the windows warmed. Jack didn't stand guard anymore. He stood witness to a life that stayed. The first morning of fall arrived without ceremony. Jack Miller woke before the sun. Not from fear, from habit. The house was quiet, not empty, earned. He stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, breath fogging the cool air. He watched the fog lift from the lake. Thin ribbons, patient. Shadow followed. Slower now, settling beside him with a soft huff. The wooden sign hung steady by the door. Home is who stays. Jack ran his thumb along the grain, feeling the grooves he carved himself. He thought of closed doors, the iron gate in Aspen, the courthouse steps, The nights when survival was the only plan left. Estate meetings once felt like threats. Now they felt like safeguards. Trust wasn't money. It was time. Time to heal, to choose, to remain. Lucy padded down the hallway, socks on wood, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Evan followed, hair wild, baseball glove in hand. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in the quiet. "Can we go to the hill?" Jack nodded. They walked the familiar path, past the training field. Veterans and dogs moving in steady rhythm. Past the cabins, lights glowing softly, even in daylight. The foundation had grown, not loud, present. People came here to breathe. Jack didn't lead them. He stayed. At the crest of the hill, the valley opened wide. Frost-line ridge stood calm in the distance. Jack felt the weight in his chest. Not heavy, not sharp. Just there. Love leaves marks, worth carrying. Shadow paused. Time 1200 mo. Nose lifted. He moved to the birch tree, sniffed once, pawed gently, as if checking a memory. All clear. Lucy took his hand. Evan leaned into his shoulder. The wind shifted. Pine and clean air. Jack thought of Emily, of planning quietly, of trusting a dog to find truth, of turning wealth into protection, protection into choice. Are we okay now? Jack waited. Truth needed time. We're okay. Not because nothing bad can happen, but because we know who we are when it does. They headed back down. Shadow moved ahead, then waited. He always did. Later, a veteran finished a session, hands shaking, then steady. Jack recognized the moment. When a body learns it's safe to stand down, the work would continue. The trust would protect the living. At sunset, Jack returned to the porch. Laughter drifted through open windows. Shadow lay at his feet, breathing slow. Jack looked at the sign. Some doors close to keep you out. Others close to teach you where the real entrance is. He rested his hand on Shadow's head. You found it. The tail thumped once. As night settled, the windows warmed. Jack didn't stand guard anymore. He stood witness to a life that stayed. The first morning of fall arrived without ceremony. Jack Miller woke before the sun. Not from fear, from habit. The house was quiet, not empty, earned. He stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, breath fogging the cool air. He watched the fog lift from the lake. Thin ribbons, patient. Shadow followed. Slower now, settling beside him with a soft huff. The wooden sign hung steady by the door. Home is who stays. Jack ran his thumb along the grain, feeling the grooves he carved himself. He thought of closed doors, the iron gate in Aspen, the courthouse steps, the nights when survival was the only plan left. Estate meetings once felt like threats. Now they felt like safeguards. Trust wasn't money. It was time. Time to heal, to choose, to remain. Lucy padded down the hallway, socks on wood, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Evan followed, hair wild, baseball glove in hand. They stood together on the porch, wrapped in the quiet. "Can we go to the hill?" Jack nodded. They walked the familiar path, past the training field. Veterans and dogs moving in steady rhythm. Past the cabins, lights glowing softly, even in daylight. The foundation had grown, not loud, present. People came here to breathe. Jack didn't lead them. He stayed. At the crest of the hill, the valley opened wide. Frost-line ridge stood calm in the distance. Jack felt the weight in his chest. Not heavy, not sharp. Just there. Love leaves marks, worth carrying. Shadow paused. Time 1200 mo. Nose lifted. He moved to the birch tree, sniffed once, pawed gently, as if checking a memory. All clear. Lucy took his hand. Evan leaned into his shoulder. The wind shifted. Pine and clean air. Jack thought of Emily, of planning quietly, of trusting a dog to find truth, of turning wealth into protection, protection into choice. Are we okay now? Jack waited. Truth needed time. We're okay. Not because nothing bad can happen, but because we know who we are when it does. They headed back down. Shadow moved ahead, then waited. He always did. Later, a veteran finished a session, hands shaking, then steady. Jack recognized the moment. When a body learns it's safe to stand down, the work would continue. The trust would protect the living. At sunset, Jack returned to the porch. Laughter drifted through open windows. Shadow lay at his feet, breathing slow. Jack looked at the sign. Some doors close to keep you out. Others close to teach you where the real entrance is. He rested his hand on Shadow's head. You found it. The tail thumped once. As night settled, the windows warmed. Jack didn't stand guard anymore. He stood witness to a life that stayed.